Okay, my friends, I hope that this different type of video structure works well for you. I'm going to use Screencastify. So instead of seeing my face, you'll see the slides. I'm sure this is actually going to work out better. I'm not sure why I didn't think of this earlier, but again, I hope this works for you. So, anyways, I'm going to go through the Unit 4 topics that we did last week, which would be helpful to review for your test, which is on Thursday. And I'll also take you through some topics that we unfortunately did not have time to cover in class that I'll talk about briefly. So I'll separate it out. I'll do the review right now, and then I'll move forward a little bit. So I'll tell you when in the video I am starting to do something else. So, anyways, taking a look at our slides presentation, we can see what we covered last week was the age of Jackson, also known as the age of the common man. A very good question to ask about this era is evaluate the extent to which Andrew Jackson represented the age of the common man, which is a topic that we hit throughout this entire slides presentation. Anyways, we learned a little bit of the background on Andrew Jackson. Not that it is that significant for your test, but basically, he is a fiercely loyal individual who's very concerned about his reputation. Specifically when it comes to his relationship with his wife. He rises to fame because he's the hero of the Battle of New Orleans and also with his Native American fighting. He's seen as definitely the man of the people because of his humble roots. We had talked about him in the American Revolution and how he basically came from some money, but not directly his family. So he bounced around from house to house as a kid, working as basically like a houseboy, just getting stuff done for the house for different family members. So, anyways, before Jackson becomes president, we do have an election that Jackson labels as a corrupt bargain. John Quincy Adams is victorious in the election of 1824. But as you can see on the map, Jackson gets more electoral college and popular votes. This is because not all states had gotten rid of the property requirement to vote. So this goes to the House of Representatives, in which picks John Quincy Adams as the president. Again, Jackson declares this a corrupt bargain. Very little to know about the Adams presidency, other than he wrote the Monroe Doctrine, something you learned about on your quiz. He raises tariffs. There is a debate between Noah Webster, who we did tell you to know. He's going to be very supportive of like the federal government and the idea that they should have power over the states. That might be a multiple choice question. I would definitely know about Daniel Webster and his argument about New England being much more concerned about federal power. That would be the answer. Uh, Jackson really does split the country in half in terms of like his beliefs. So you do develop the end of the era of good feelings. There's also a multiple choice question, or you're going to look at the dates and you're going to be like, "Whoa, I don't know what." The one date is the election that ends the era of good feelings, and the answer to the question on the multiple choice is like the rise of political parties, because Jackson is quite controversial. Again, his Democrats are going to take hold. And because he's so popular, he forms his own political party, the Democrats. And the people that oppose him, specifically Jackson's big opponents, John C. Calhoun, who ends up being his vice president, ironically, and Henry Clay, create the Whig Party, which is going to rise up against the Democrats. They eventually collapse and become the Republicans, but that's in Unit 5. Anyways, we did see the dramatic increase in voter turnout in the elections between 1824 and 1828. Again, the reason for that is that you have universal white male suffrage. There's no more property requirements. So a great argument for the age of Andrew Jackson being the age of the common man is that the common man, the common white man, let's call it what it is, now gets the right to vote. We also see the spoils system under Jackson, where he rewards political participation with public offices, and politics really become some sort of like sport, like we had talked about in class. There's parades and rallies and presidential nicknames and slogans and all that good stuff. So, anyways, the election requirements changed, leading to a decisive Jackson victory in the election of 1828. He wins in a landslide. We can see the map there as well. And again, we still see the sectional tensions developing between the two parties, between the two regions, I should say, where the South is still going to vote mostly for states' rights, and the North is going to be much more structured on federalism. Also, their economies are massively different. You should know that from the market revolution as well. Um, Other arguments for Jackson being the common man, he has the King Mob inauguration, where basically he throws a giant party at the White House that he has to sneak out a window to get out of. That does represent the people. He also will take meetings with people pretty much at any time. If you just show up to the White House and you're patient, you can get a meeting with the president, which is a pretty wild thing in the first place. The Peggy Eaton affair, also known as the Petticoat affair, is that where Jackson backs up one of his cabinet members, who's the rest of the cabinet refuses to hang out with Andrew Jackson. with Andrew Jackson, with the Eaton family, because they are married in a non-conventional way at the time, similar to Jackson and Rachel getting married. So he definitely sympathizes with them. Moving on, Jackson is mostly domestic policy stuff we're worried about with Jackson. There's very few foreign policy things with him. He originally believes in like laissez-faire economics, which means like no government intervention. He hates monopolies and he hates elite privilege, which he sees the Bank of the United States as being this monopoly that supports the elitists. We can see that because the Bank of the United States is giving loans to congressmen at cheaper rates than other people, which again, he sees as an elitist thing to do. Jackson also believes in hard money, so physical paper money instead of credit. It's difficult to obtain credit unless you already have like a reputation or money to back that up. So it's more of a common man type thing to believe in like hard currency. So he does battle with the Bank of the United States. He refers to it as the monster. Probably one of the more critical things that you need to know about the Andrew Jackson presidency is this monster fight that he has. He eventually vetoes the charter of the Bank of the United States, leading to its collapse. And in the immediate outcome of this, as I scroll down a couple slides, is the Panic of 1837. So in the short term, Jackson fighting the Bank of the United States, the downfall of the mother bank, as you can see in the political cartoon, has like the elitist interest, the congressman running away while like John Q. Public over here is celebrating Jackson. It does have the short-term result of having a panic and depression throughout the 1830s. However, in the long term, it's what allows us to have privatized banking. So it definitely becomes, a positive in the long term. The other massive, massive thing about Jackson's presidency, so far we've seen how he's the age of the common man, his battle with the Bank of the United States, is nullification. Nullification is going to be an issue in which the states, the southern states specifically, think that they can nullify and not follow federal law. It's in the tradition of the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions and would be wink, wink, hint, hint, a great piece of context for a possible LEQ I'm going to have you write on your test that has to do with tracing the rise of federal power. If you wrote in your context about how there's always been this battle between the states and the federal government, as can be seen in the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions, that would be a great thing to put in your opening paragraph. Anyways, basically, Jackson passes something called the Tariff of Abominations, which specifically targets Southern trade. So the Southerns are annoyed about this tariff, the Southerners. So South Carolina tries to nullify this federal law. This is obviously not successful. Jackson says that he will use the American Army and the force bill to make South Carolina pay the tariff. Which he eventually does, basically threatening John C. Calhoun in South Carolina until they follow federal law. Obviously, this is dramatic increase in sectional tensions between the North and the South and gives the federal government a lot of power. Jackson's veto of the Bank of the United States, as well as the force bill, gives the federal government a ton of power. So that might also be great pieces of specific evidence to write in your LEQ for your test. Right? Increase of federal power can be seen in the force bill and the nullification crisis, right? Can be seen in Thomas Jefferson's expansion of like the Louisiana Purchase without asking Congress, or declaring war without asking Congress, or Jackson completely ignoring the Supreme Court, which is one of the last things we learned about. Andrew Jackson in the Supreme Court case Worcester versus Georgia. Native Americans sue the United States and basically say you can't move us off of our land to Oklahoma because you signed treaties with us. And the Supreme Court agrees in Worcester versus Georgia, a Supreme Court case you need to know. The reason why you need to know it is because even though the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Native Americans, Andrew Jackson basically said Chief Justice Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it, showing you the separation of powers in the branches, where the Supreme Court does not have an army. The executive branch does. So we are basically trusting the fact that the executive will follow what the Supreme Court says. And Andrew Jackson doing this and ignoring the court, which eventually becomes Martin Van Buren's issue, by the way, because the presidency ends, puts our democracy in serious trouble. This is a huge black eye on Jackson's presidency because he basically almost tears apart the fabric of like order in the U.S. and listening to the Supreme Court. So that's definitely one you need to know as well. It leads to the Trail of Tears. Very sad, leads to the death of tens of thousands of Native Americans in the move out to Oklahoma, which finally leads to this political cartoon, which you definitely need to know. This is King Andrew the First. right? Basically, in his hand here is the veto bill of the Bank of the United States. He's stepping over the Constitution, which can, be seen in Worcester versus Georgia, ignoring the Supreme Court. And he is dressed as a monarch because he's increasing the size of federal power. Anyways, that is the Jackson recap. I would definitely know all the critical pieces of information I told you to. Definitely watch this video. I'll record a second one here that takes you through the new stuff that I need you to know for the test as well.